One of the hardest things for people to accept is that silence can be a form of communication. When someone goes weeks or even months without contacting you, the mind immediately begins searching for answers. It creates theories, questions, and possibilities. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they are overwhelmed. Maybe they are waiting for the right moment. Maybe they are thinking about you but do not know what to say. The human mind dislikes uncertainty. It wants closure. It wants explanations. It wants a clear answer that removes the discomfort of not knowing. But in many situations, the silence itself is already providing information. That does not mean you should jump to harsh conclusions. It does not mean assuming the worst about someone. People go through difficult periods. Life can become complicated. Personal struggles, emotional challenges, family issues, work demands, and unexpected circumstances can affect communication. However, emotionally mature people learn to focus on patterns rather than possibilities. Because possibilities are endless, parts reveal reality. A person can say they care. A person can say they miss you. A person can say they want a connection. But over time, actions reveal whether those words are supported by consistent behavior. This is why silence matters. Not because silence automatically means rejection, but because silence provides information about priorities, attention, investment, and availability. Many people become trapped because they focus on what someone might be feeling instead of what someone is actually doing. They spend months analyzing hidden meanings, months imagining conversations that never happened, months creating explanations for behavior they do not fully understand. And during that time, they often ignore the clearest evidence available, the evidence of reality. Reality is not always found in promises. Reality is often found in patterns. If someone consistently wants to be part of your life, their behavior usually reflects that desire. The form may vary. The frequency may vary. Life circumstances may create temporary distance, but genuine interest tends to create effort. People make time for things that matter to them, not perfectly, not constantly, but consistently enough that the connection remains alive. This is why silence should not be viewed as a mystery to solve. It should be viewed as information to observe. Observation creates clarity. Obsession creates confusion. When people become obsessed with finding hidden meanings, they stop paying attention to what is actually happening. They become emotionally attached to possibilities instead of facts, and possibilities can keep someone emotionally stuck for a very long time. The truth is, when someone goes months without contacting you, the most important thing is not figuring out every reason behind their behavior. The most important thing is understanding what their behavior is communicating in the present moment. Because regardless of the explanation, the result remains the same. The connection is not being actively maintained, and that reality deserves attention. Emotionally strong individuals understand this. They do not spend their lives chasing endless interpretations. They observe. They accept what is happening. They allow actions to speak for themselves, because actions often communicate more honestly than words ever could, and the moment you stop treating silence as a puzzle and start treating it as information, you begin seeing situations more clearly and protecting yourself from the confusion that endless speculation creates. When someone disappears for months without contacting you, one of the most natural reactions is to search for answers. The mind immediately begins filling in the blanks. It replays old conversations, it analyzes messages, it revisits memories, it searches social media for clues. It tries to find one piece of information that will finally explain what happened. At first, this feels productive. It feels like you are trying to understand the situation. But often, what begins as curiosity slowly becomes something much more painful. It becomes overthinking. And overthinking has a way of creating suffering that reality alone could never create. The reason is simple. When there are no clear answers, the mind creates its own. Sometimes those stories are hopeful, maybe they are busy, maybe they are afraid, maybe they are waiting for the right moment, maybe they still care but do not know how to reach out. Other times, those stories become painful, maybe you were not enough, maybe they never cared. Maybe you did something wrong, maybe there is something wrong with you. The problem is that none of these stories are facts, they are assumptions, and assumptions rarely bring peace. In fact, they often create emotional exhaustion. Many people become trapped in a cycle where they spend more energy analyzing someone else's silence than they spend improving their own lives. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months. Their attention remains fixed on a person who is no longer actively participating in the connection. Without realizing it, they hand over enormous power. Their mood becomes dependent on a message that may never arrive. Their confidence becomes tied to someone else's behavior. Their emotional well-being becomes connected to uncertainty. And uncertainty is a difficult place to build a healthy life. This is why emotionally strong people approach silence differently. They focus on reality instead of imagination. Reality is what has happened. Imagination is what might be happening. Reality is observable. Imagination is endless. When people become consumed by imagination, they often create emotional wounds that have little connection to the actual situation. They fight invisible battles. They argue with possibilities They become emotionally attached to explanations that may not even be true. And all of this energy is spent chasing certainty where certainty may not exist. The difficult truth is that sometimes you will not get an explanation, sometimes you will not receive closure, sometimes the answers you want simply never arrive. And while that can feel unfair, accepting this reality is often healthier than endlessly chasing answers, because chasing clarity from someone who has chosen distance rarely creates peace. Peace comes from accepting what is visible. What is visible is the absence. What is visible is the lack of communication. What is visible is the current reality of the situation. Emotionally mature people understand that they do not need to know every reason behind someone's behavior in order to respond wisely to it. They focus on what is happening rather than what might be happening. And that shift changes everything, because the moment you stop chasing explanations and start accepting reality, you reclaim your attention, your energy, and your emotional freedom from a situation that uncertainty was quietly controlling. One of the most reliable truths in human relationships is that interest tends to reveal itself through effort. People often make relationships more complicated than they need to be. They search for hidden meanings, mixed signals, and secret intentions. They spend hours trying to decode behavior that appears confusing. But when you step back and look at things objectively, one pattern consistently stands out. People invest in what matters to them. This does not mean that effort always looks the same. Everyone has different personalities, responsibilities, communication styles, and life circumstances. Some people communicate more frequently than others. Some people are naturally reserved. Some people go through periods where life becomes overwhelming. All of that is true. But there is an important difference between inconsistent communication and complete disappearance. There is a difference between being busy and being absent. There is a difference between temporary distance and months of silence. Many people struggle to accept this because they focus on exceptions rather than patterns. They search for reasons that explain away what is happening. They convince themselves that circumstances must be responsible. They continue waiting because they believe the situation will suddenly change, and while exceptions certainly exist, emotionally healthy people pay attention to behavior over time because behavior reveals priorities. Think about the people you genuinely care about. Even during stressful periods, even during busy seasons of life, there is usually some effort to maintain important connections. A message, a phone call, a brief check-in, some indication that the relationship still matters. The effort may not be perfect, but it exists. This is why effort is such a powerful indicator. Effort demonstrates attention. Effort demonstrates interest. Effort demonstrates investment. Words can be confusing. Promises can be inconsistent. Intentions can be difficult to measure. But effort leaves evidence, and evidence matters. Many people become emotionally trapped because they focus on potential instead of evidence. They focus on who someone could be instead of who they are being. They focus on what someone once said instead of what someone is consistently doing. This creates a gap between reality and hope. And the larger that gap becomes, the more painful the situation often feels. The truth is that genuine interest usually creates movement. When someone values a connection, they generally find ways to maintain it. Not perfectly, not constantly, but intentionally enough that the relationship remains active. When months pass without contact, it becomes important to acknowledge what that behavior may be communicating, not with bitterness, not with anger, but with honesty, because honesty allows growth. The goal is not to judge another person's choices. Everyone has their own reasons, circumstances, and priorities. The goal is simply to recognize reality as it exists. Reality is found in actions. Reality is found in patterns. Reality is found in effort. And while effort alone does not tell you everything about a person, it often tells you more than endless speculation ever could. The moment you stop focusing on promises, possibilities, and imagined explanations and start paying attention to consistent effort, you gain a clearer understanding of where you truly stand and where your emotional energy is best invested. One of the most painful mistakes people make when someone disappears from their life is turning that absence into a judgment about themselves. The silence begins, the distance grows, and almost immediately the mind starts asking difficult questions. What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I enough? Why did they stop caring? What is wrong with me? These questions feel natural because human beings often personalize experiences they do not fully understand. When someone withdraws, ignores, rejects, or distances themselves, many people automatically assume the behavior must reflect their value. But this assumption creates unnecessary suffering because another person's choices are not always a reflection of your worth. In fact, they are often a reflection of their own priorities, circumstances, emotional capacity, fears, struggles, or personal decisions. Yet when people are emotionally attached, they frequently overlook this reality. Instead of observing the situation objectively, they internalize it. Someone stops contacting them and they question their attractiveness. Someone becomes distant and they question their value. Someone loses interest and they question their entire identity. Without realizing it, they allow another person's behavior to become the judge of their self-worth. And that is a dangerous place to build confidence, because if your value depends on how others treat you, your confidence will constantly rise and fall according to other people's decisions. One person's approval will make you feel worthy. One person's rejection will make you feel inadequate. One person's attention will make you feel important. One person's silence will make you feel invisible. That is not confidence. That is emotional dependency. Emotionally healthy individuals understand something different. They understand that relationships involve two people. And because they involve two people, outcomes are influenced by factors that extend far beyond your control. Someone may disappear because they are emotionally unavailable. Someone may disappear because they are confused about what they want. Someone may disappear because their priorities have changed. Someone may disappear because they are avoiding responsibility, conflict, or vulnerability. None of these explanations automatically mean you are unworthy. But when people personalize everything, they rarely consider these possibilities. Instead, they focus entirely on themselves, and the mind becomes harsh. It begins searching for flaws, matching for mistakes, matching for reasons to justify the rejection. The problem is that self-worth cannot survive if it is constantly placed in the hands of other people, because people are inconsistent, their feelings change, their circumstances change, their choices change, and if your value depends on those variables, your peace becomes fragile. This is why emotional maturity requires separating your identity from someone else's behavior. You can acknowledge disappointment without questioning your worth. You can experience rejection without believing you are inadequate. You can accept someone's absence without turning it into evidence against yourself, because your value existed before they arrived, and your value remains after they leave. The truth is, another person's silence may tell you something important about them, their priorities, or the state of the connection, but it does not define your worth. And the moment you stop measuring your value through someone else's attention, approval, or presence, you begin building a confidence that remains stable regardless of who chooses to stay and who chooses to walk away. One of the most damaging things a person can do after someone disappears from their life is put their own life on hold. At first, it seems harmless. You tell yourself you are just waiting for clarity. You tell yourself you are giving the situation time. You convince yourself that things might change tomorrow, next week, or next month. But while you are waiting, something important begins to happen. Your attention remains trapped, your energy remains trapped, your focus remains trapped. Instead of moving forward, part of your life becomes emotionally anchored to a person who is no longer actively present. Many people do not realize how much this affects them. They continue thinking about the person every day. They check for messages. They wonder what the other person is doing. They replay old memories. They imagine future conversations that may never happen, and little by little they stop investing in themselves. This is where waiting becomes dangerous, because waiting often feels passive, but emotionally it can become a full-time occupation. The mind stays focused on what is missing instead of what is possible. It stays attached to uncertainty instead of growth. And the longer this continues, the more personal power is surrendered. Think about what happens when someone becomes emotionally stuck in waiting. They delay new opportunities, they postpone personal goals, they hesitate to meet new people, they stop fully engaging with their own lives. Everything becomes centered around a question that has not been answered. Will they come back? The problem is that this question places your future in someone else's hands. Your happiness becomes dependent on their decision. Your progress becomes dependent on their action. Your peace becomes dependent on their return. And that is a heavy price to pay for someone who is not actively choosing to participate in your life. Emotionally strong individuals eventually recognize this pattern. They understand that while they cannot control another person's behavior, they can control where they invest their attention. And attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Whatever receives your attention grows. If uncertainty receives your attention, anxiety grows. If regret receives your attention, sadness grows. If personal growth receives your attention, confidence grows. This is why healing often begins with a simple shift. Instead of asking, why haven't they contacted me? You begin asking, what can I build while I move forward? You focus on your goals, your health, your mindset, your friendships, your purpose, your future. You stop making someone else's absence the center of your life story. And as your focus shifts, something remarkable happens. The emotional grip of the situation begins weakening, not because you suddenly stop caring, but because your identity is no longer organized around waiting. Your life starts moving again, your energy starts returning, your confidence begins rebuilding itself through action. The truth is, every day spent waiting for someone who is absent is a day that could be invested in becoming stronger, wiser, healthier, and more fulfilled. And the moment you stop putting your life on hold and start reinvesting your time, energy, and attention into yourself, you begin reclaiming the power that waiting quietly took away. At some point, every person faces a choice. After the confusion, after the waiting, after the endless questions and sleepless nights, there comes a moment when reality asks something difficult from you. It asks whether you are going to keep fighting what is happening or finally accept it. Acceptance is one of the most misunderstood concepts in life. Many people hear the word and immediately think it means giving up. They think it means approving of what happened. They think it means pretending they were never hurt. But true acceptance means none of those things. Acceptance simply means seeing reality clearly. It means recognizing what is happening without constantly trying to turn it into something else. When someone goes months without contacting you, the mind often resists reality. It wants different answers, it wants different outcomes, it wants certainty, explanations, and reassurance. It wants the story to unfold in a way that feels comfortable. But reality does not always cooperate with our preferences. Sometimes people leave, sometimes people grow distant, sometimes connections fade, and sometimes the answers we want never arrive. The stronger the resistance to these realities, the longer the suffering often continues. Because resistance keeps a person emotionally trapped in the past, they continue replaying conversations, they continue imagining different outcomes, they continue hoping that if they think about the situation long enough, somehow it will change. But life moves forward, and emotionally mature people eventually learn to move forward with it. This does not mean they stop caring. It does not mean the disappointment disappears overnight. It does not mean they suddenly become unaffected. What it means is that they stop chasing what is unavailable. They stop forcing what is unwilling. They stop investing their emotional energy into a situation that is no longer actively moving. Instead, they begin respecting reality, and reality deserves respect because it tells the truth. Not always the truth we want, but the truth we need. One of the strongest signs of confidence is the ability to let people make their choices without trying to control them. If someone wants distance, you allow the distance. If someone chooses absence, you acknowledge the absence. If someone decides not to participate in the connection, you accept that decision rather than spending months fighting it. This takes tremendous strength because it requires letting go of the illusion of control. Many people believe confidence means getting what you want, but often confidence means accepting what you cannot control and remaining grounded anyway. It means trusting yourself enough to continue forward without needing every situation to resolve exactly as you hoped. And this is where dignity enters the picture. Dignity is not found in chasing endlessly. It is not found in begging for attention. It is not found in convincing someone to choose you. Dignity is found in recognizing your worth, respecting reality, and continuing your journey without abandoning your self-respect. The truth is, peace does not come from forcing people to stay, demanding explanations, or holding on to possibilities forever. Peace comes from accepting what someone's actions have revealed, learning what the experience has taught you, and moving forward with wisdom instead of resentment. And the moment you stop chasing unavailable people and start trusting yourself enough to walk forward, you discover a level of confidence, freedom, and self-respect that no one else's absence can ever take away.